Wealth you always name is never common. Find another way. So I turn to you, the ones that said you always rule. Why you never seem to think the past's a problem. Find another way. If you never learn, there can be a lesson. If we never earn, that is the oppression. With the wrong to right, there can be a limit. Waving all the flags, why is that a gimmick? Learning for yourself, self-determination. Yeah, you see the black, that is the relation. Trying to open up, start a conversation. Yeah, I say it loud, bring the reparation. How you gonna settle the scars? How you gonna limit the pain? How you gonna heal the heart? So find another way. How you gonna settle the scars?
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for coming to today's event. So my name is Salome Wagaini and I am Programme Manager for Season for Change. And today is a keynote by Zena Edwards entitled Building an Inclusive Movement. Before we start, I'd just like to do a bit of housekeeping for the session. So today's conversation and speech will be recorded. But if you've got any questions, please use the question and answer function for any questions you have throughout. We have a tech host, Days Hale, on hand to support any questions that you might have. So if you just write your technical questions and address it to all panelists, Days will be able to see that. This session is being BSL interpreted, so please look out for that. And also it is being live captioned. So if you go to the bottom of the screen, you should see a subtitles button on the bottom right next to share screen. Please use this to view captions and or transcript. We are on social media and would love for you to join us in the conversation there. We are using the hashtag Season for Change. As I mentioned, this is Season for Exchange, and it is a precursor to the open programme that we will be running in the spring. Season for Exchange is a 3-week free programme with online workshops, conversations and artist interventions to inspire artists and arts professionals to learn, share knowledge and talk about climate action and climate justice. The project is led by Arts Admin and Julie's Bicycle, delivered in collaboration with partners nationwide and supported by Arts Council England and Paul Hamlyn Foundation. And I will now lead on and introduce you to Alison.
Thank you so much, Salome, and thanks everybody for coming today. I have the huge privilege and good fortune to be able to introduce somebody who Julie's Bicycles had the real privilege of working with for some time now, Zena Edwards, who has been involved in our events and also has been involved in the Colour Green podcast series with Lola Young. And I know that you've got a really special afternoon in front of you. So just a little bit about Zena. Zena is a writer, performance poet, a singer, a radical arts educator, and creative director of Verse in Dialogue, which is an arts and public engagement organisation dedicated to championing the arts for positive change. Raised in Tottenham in North London, Zena's become known as one of the most unique voices of performance poetry to come out of London. And she is also known, really importantly, for her polemic voice, speaking on panels for climate justice, advocating for action on the climate crisis, and campaigning for equality and equitable rights. Indeed, some of you might recognise Zena, if you don't already know her, when she famously and beautifully rode the White Horse as the inaugural event for Culture Declares Emergency, wearing an incredible green lawn coat that was designed by Heather Ackroyd. So Zena's been involved in performance for 20 years as a writer, poet, performer, facilitator, creative project developer and vocalist after graduating from Middlesex University, and recently studied at the London International School for Performing Arts. As a poet, and if you haven't heard Zena's poetry, you're going to really enjoy this afternoon, and go and check them out. She's travelled extensively around the UK, the US, Africa and Europe, collaborating with artists such as Nigerian choreographer Kudus Onikeku and award-winning visual artist Siasta Gates, and toured supporting living legend Hugh Masekela, The Last Poet, and Baba Mal. She's shared the stage and anthologies with some of her most admired predecessors, including Linton Kwesi Johnson, Sonia Sanchez, Lem Sese, and Jean Bintabreeze, Roger McGough. So she's really had been in the company of the greats as she is. And as part of Season for Change, Zena will be working with Apples and Snakes on a new commission in 2021. So we're really looking forward to hearing about that. So Zena, enough of me. Thanks so much for coming on, and it's over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Alison. Thank you, Salome. I have to say that I have been really looking forward to this event, really looking forward to sharing my thoughts around this idea of inclusivity in the climate justice movement. And I found it to be interesting for me to just explore writing this, to be quite honest. I thought I would do something that was very much truthful to me as Zena, where I'm from, my background, how I feel, like genuinely deep down in my heart, those emotions that guide my direction, where I go in life, the choices that I make. So this is a completely different experience to what I imagined I would be doing. So please sit back, enjoy the ride, because it's going to be one. The piece I would like to start with is a film. I'd like our friend Daisy to sort of like press the button when I say go in a second. But this is about, as I said, this is about an emotional journey, as much as it is about the climate and environmental justice. So yeah, let's go. Let's take it away. The underrepresentation of the black and brown voice in the room is a problem. But whose though? Because we will continue to feed our children. Despite the invisibility of our voice in mainstream environmental activism, we will continue to feed our children. The problem with our voices not being there is the disconnect from the historical actuality of environmental injustices experienced mostly by those from the global south, the homelands of First Nation peoples, and on the bodies of the diaspora. Black and brown folk are a resource. Now, with the threat of TTIP, US and British corporate fracking the out of their own backyards, and the rampancy of the virus of gentrification funded by international land grabbers in the UK, now even more attention needs to be paid to the minimal presence of diverse groups. But there's this crazy cognitive It's easier to perceive that we are apathetic to climate issues, even to envisage our activism being focused on hashtags saying we deserve to live. You'd think environmental activism did not exist on our radar, but it does. It's easy to perceive that environmental activism is for the privileged, for those whose money is long enough to buy time to save whales, protest outside Parliament, and flash mob morally bankrupt corporate oil headquarters. In the kitchen of racist resource inequality, discriminatory policy cooks up a pot of impoverishment for the city, with diabetes, obesity, and malnutrition, constrictive breathing conditions from the cold and toxic air quality, biased education, job rejection, a prison destination, and help yourself. Take these. No, you will take these. The resourcism is real, and the breath in Black and brown eco-activism is a living, breathing reality, relegated to mainstream activism's blind spot. Do static tropes of Africa in crisis feed a belief that her descendants will always be the historical problem left over from the abolition of the barbaric practice of chattel enslavement? Are these tropes preventing engagement with race? We are all keepers of the garden, and the planet cannot be saved by one group. The saving does not belong to one people, so no disrespect intended, but you do not get a cookie for good intentions. Somewhere in your periphery, there is a moving shadow, a tinnitus static in your ear saying, race is a part of social simple refusal to hear us, saying we hold solutions learned from our existence of struggle, reveals a lethargy, a reluctance, a resistance to address race. A neoliberal proverb. It is individualist perceptions of what an authentic environmental activist looks like that feeds into divide and rule. It silences core climate justice principles, interconnectivity and interdependence. There is no hierarchy. In actuality, black and brown-skinned environmental activism is rooted in radical resistance whose principles liberate all, because it is work that responds to the immediate needs of the oppressed. Environmental inequality unpicks the fabric of community, and the people stitch and dig till dawn, because the children will be fed and raised to understand that they can say, "F you, mister, I grew my own tomatoes." Shout out to keep the aspidistra flying. So black and brown skin green economy initiatives are born, promoting green education. And that's a beautiful thing, man. Yes, it is a beautiful thing. Time for intentional listening with intent for purposeful action. Can't say we never let you know. Shine a light on that blind spot. Come we grow. Shout out to May Project Gardens. As I sit on my sofa in my house on day 218 of lockdown, thinking about a keynote speech, I think about all the women speakers I respect, who I am inspired by, who speak with gravitas, with a sensual authority from a grounded place within. I speak of the likes of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Brené Brown, Toni Morrison. I think about how their centeredness is extraordinary, as if they know something I don't. I hang on their every word, imagining what it would be like to wake up each morning, stretch my spine before coffee and toast, and feel as empowered as they sound. But that scene doesn't quite play out for me as I wrote this offering, and I'm trying to work out why. Here, 31 weeks into lockdown, I sit in my front room on my couch where I let it all hang out after a hard day's graft in the arts and culture sector in the UK. There is none of the regalia, no glass prismatic lectern with a stick insect microphone or a red dot of a TED Talk floor mat and a massive screen with a slick slideshow or beautifully ambient purple gold twilight light that casts photographic halos about my skin. I'm on my couch in my house in South London. The words keynote make me think of Nobel Peace Prize winners and other prestigious ceremonial awards which require ball gowns and black ties or certificates with gold seals and multitudes of letters after my names on the wall in gold and oak frames. Today I sit in my house looking at that cobweb in the corner, a cup and a plate in the sink, a boiler that is on the brink of kaput, the fridge not full of leafy green veggies I would like it to have right now. And I think about the expectations upon me to deliver words that might give answers about how we address inclusivity in the climate justice movement. But the word inclusivity troubles me, as does the word diversity. They both have this exclusivity implicit within them, as if I'm not allowed, or as if I am allowed to join a private members club that has rules and ways of being embedded in its ethos of existence. And if I do not follow the rules, you may experience a plethora of shades of resistance to the changes that you are invited in to initiate. And it can get deep, because those same shades of resistance can vary in intensity depending on the spectrum of the hue of the black or brown person's skin, to the potency of the truth that they bring into the room. Some of my experiences have included interactions with career activists to agent provocateurs, and in real time, those incidences have been less than pleasant and at worst, a toxic rude awakening to how power sought is power sought anywhere. These spaces, organizations, campaigns, and movements all had one thing in common though: their operational structures, how they ran business, how mobilization was organized and implemented. More on that later though. I was as horrified as everyone else to watch the lynching of George Floyd and find out about the reckless abandon of the trigger happiness which killed Breonna Taylor. My inbox has not stopped buzzing since. Offers to speak, to perform for hashtags have been abundant, and believe me, the jobbing artist in me is ecstatic. However, the activist in me asks, why like this and why now? And a complex set of emotions have paid a visit. They have sat here with me on my couch and attempted to reason with resentment, who took up a lot of airtime. Oh, it was all clearer before, wasn't it? When it was about diversity quotas, rehashing diversity policy, throw some money at some representation and have some distracting conversations about who gets the money when there's reparations. And then epithets hailing the exploit of colonial looters fell, and it all got a bit serious. So you do give a damn about ancestry. Just whose though? Now I can hear folks saying, but you can't blame all white people for what their ancestors did. It's 2020 and you're a Black artist being offered a gig. Yes, I am. But I'm also a human being going through some extraordinary emotions with my own shadow work as colonial trauma is upturned and picked over and prodded and poked and stared at. And I say this with love for the human project. I don't have any room to hold the enormity of the awe, for the surge of outrage, for the burning conviction for change in whiteness, its panic buying of absolution from its rotten past in this generation's lifespan, for the roaring hunger for knowledge about how whiteness can help. The mainstream is noisy as FA, demanding attention be paid to racism's existence, with the intensity levels as high as its rejection of British racism that it was the day before. Black folks have not had this much attention since the Civil Rights Movement, and that was in America. The phenomena of being Black in the UK never got this much coverage, not in this shape before, and it needs to be understood. It still equates to white noise and pressure. I've never received so much attention as a Black woman before, at a particular age. What, you mean me? Are you sure? I also needed to keep up with the demand of young voices suddenly wanting intergenerational support and understanding and wisdom that points the way in 20, while alone, I tried to nurse wounds inflicted since the 80s, re-exposed in 2020. I'm only human, and I give thanks that I am able to be here, to have space to feel when my ancestors didn't. They were not afforded that kind of humanity. So sometimes I just need to be quiet while I'm watching the insurrections and hearing the wall of sound of misinformation, disinformation. It's been a lot. And there's a need to gather thoughts and let the hum of this enormous roiling energy that hit me like a truck of change subside. And I've had to ask for space to do the breathing that people were out there marching for. Now I say all of this to give context of the sensitivities that exist within going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda. That is, there is a human spirit feeling packaged. I'll say that again. There is a human spirit feeling packaged in a melanated skin. So back to the keynote speech. The week leading up to today was hectic. I've been invited by Culture Declares Emergency, which is now a global movement of some of London's largest cultural institutions and organizations and individual artists making public announcements that they stand with the ecological crisis movement and command their governments to honor a moral obligation to adjust emissions policy, to consider the rights of the earth and the rights of nature, and to honor its personhood so that it can be fought for legally as an entity in the courts, supposedly houses of justice. But it is evident that these structures are merely hollow shells that uphold the law, but not necessarily justice. People with families and loved ones populate these spaces. They have papers that make them official guardians of justice. But accountability means nothing if there is no honor. So I wondered, what kind of expectations people attending this event will have of me, a simple working class black girl from Tottenham with a single parent Windrush generation mother who lost all contact with her mother at the age of 4 when her father, an economic migrant, came as a British subject to restore a debt-riddled UK after the Second European War. It really had nothing to do with anyone else. They got dragged in by colonial proxy. The result, a fracturing of families from the Caribbean when it wasn't considered important enough to document and monitor the descendants of slaves with efficiency. A fracturing that left splinters in my mother's psyche when her citizenship was questioned 50 years later. As yet, another European squabble occurs. Her status is mystified, her personhood tenuous. So she gardened, planting seeds of calm, spring onions, kale, potatoes, sweet peas, lilies, roses, hyacinth, elderberry. Everyone from the Caribbean had green fingers once. Pretty much all could build a house from scratch. I am first generation born in the UK, and I self-define outside of the convenient tick boxes as Afri-Carib British. It's a triad of resistance to a colonial narrative, a script handed to me at birth. I am of African descent, surviving the Caribbean chattel enslavement heritage from the islands of St. Kitts and Nevis, considered 2 of the most brutal slaveholds, moving into a liminal space of thriving, culturally, spiritually, and emotionally, with the first generation born British migrant settler experience. I have woken up struggling for my personhood outside of this triangle, realizing parts of my wholeness are to be found within. I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human and I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. I am here, I exist. I shake my fist with these words from my lips. My mind is set and my body is strong. I sing of a rebirth. No victim song, no, 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 no. 'Cause I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. The system is blind, it binds my feet to silence my skin, no freedom of speech. I work all day so I can find peace. States of violence are at a peak. Na 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 na. 'Cause nature is life, this earth has got rights. I'll fight for her freedom all of my life. The road is long, but the struggle is strong. No justice, no peace, our victory song. Na 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 na. 'Cause I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. Yes, I know where my soul belongs, and I know where my heart belongs, and I know where I belong. So I sing and I say all of this to give context of the sensitivities that exist within when going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human spirit feeling packaged in melanated skin. So as I am invited to write a keynote speech about a planet fighting for personhood and a mother who does the same, I think about what I can say as a Black working class woman who happens to be very passionate about words, communicating, stories, connecting to people, connecting people, who thinks that the species can do some shocking things. But I also think that it's okay. I do not believe that we are all born bad, selfish, or full of sin. I believe we are all learning to grow into all our skins. We are young compared to sharks who have existed for 30 million years and crocodiles, 80 million. We are toddlers in comparison. I'm a Black working class girl from Tottenham who has an almighty, overwhelming love for this rock floating in black space between Venus and Mars, the goddess of love and the god of war. A sentient orb, forever and graciously abundant, feeding us, putting clothes on our back, giving us space to play and speculate on what this existence is really for. This living, breathing organism, generously encouraging and guiding us to grow, develop, and learn about who we are, and that our very existence is a lesson in its own right without there having to be an outcome. That just general contentedness of us just being here. And importantly, giving us flashes of color, clashes of excitement, blooms of thunder, caresses of spring winds. And how our well-being and mental health, our happiness is connected to our relationship to everything, not just our immediate families, our friends, or localized community, but also to the wider environment, to the world at large, what we see around us in terms of the structures that we build, the spaces we leave for breath that is clean, not tainted by the toxicity of a greedy grab of cubic airspace bought by billionaires and corporate moguls who want perfect views of London for their luxury apartments on expensive roads, while those without homes die as collateral on the same streets where we are laying so many bouquets that pave the road as meadows of shrines, as disenfranchised young are living in the margins of the same scripts that I grew up in, written by parliamentary whips handling MPs' businesses and sliding fat envelopes across tables with special handshakes and winks. I want to write a keynote speech that is all about the pearly silver of the moon that enchants me, and not about the lunar gold rust because NASA is mining it for precious metals. I want to talk about standing next to large bodies of water that complete me, and not about the hundreds of tons of plastic forming floating islands across the coast of Honduras or traversing the Indian Ocean. I want to speak about the healing properties of trees that can be felt through my brand name trainers as I walk through the park, their roots humming, communicating, sharing nutrients as they conserve their energy for winter and gift us with clean air in spring. Maybe March, maybe June. The earth cycles and rhythms are skewed. And I sit here on my sofa In another one of the most deadliest times in world history, a global pandemic, after we've had one of the most spectacular summers in spring. The sun consistently reciprocating. My skin remembered itself after a long grey winter, ancestral DNA kicking in, and I'm being called to move. I bought myself a hula hoop. I watched poet Cat Francoise run regular Keep Fit classes via Facebook Live, and I danced in my kitchen, getting my Cuban salsa groove on. Missing carnival, strangers coming together, sharing a drink, maybe a spliff, winding up clumsily, dancing to forget their troubles for a moment. And I haven't been for years, but it still stands as a gift, a Windrush antidote to colonial poison. How that has been forgotten. And I say all of this to give context of the sensitivities that exist within. Going into activist spaces with inclusion, with an agenda, that there is a human spirit feeling packaged in a melanated skin. Now we cannot touch. Instead, folks express their love through bandwidth, from the chest up, and they wipe their eyes from the saline blur of disappointment that we could have done better. If only the crisis was not a reflection of the normal we were complicit in upholding. The crisis that the global South has endured for centuries. I visualize all the indigenous rights movements in their gratitude rituals, holding fast to their descent and ritualizing resistance, refusing to be undermined or removed from their sovereignty, their agency. So I am called to ask the question, whose emergency, whose crisis are we talking about here? And what does a climate activist have to look like to be included in the movement? As I draw this speech to a close, and as much as I love Chimamanda and Tony, I want to quote people I know. I need to do a roll call of people I know who are doing the work. KMT, a hip hop gardener whose blossoming community garden and educational project was founded in honor of his mother's bipolar. May Project Garden is what an environmental justice activism space looks like. The Brixton Kitchen that cooks with the vegetables grown in gardens behind terraced houses in the not so nice part of town. I want to quote Serena Solanke, who introduced me to the idea of any movement moving forward, moving at the speed of trust to strengthen cultural straining dynamics within the movement. I want to quote Jeffrey Chambers, an incredible artist and clever brain who noted that the concept of race is ontological. It relies on the Black and brown body to be objectified, to be dehumanized and consumed because the resourcism is real. I want to call in Lisa Mead, who introduced me to the idea of the master colonial blueprint of business by which all operational workings of administration and organization in the Western world to date was created by the brutal gangsterism of the East India Company of Britain. I want to speak about how America is the belly of the beast. It is pure appetite, but for me, Britain is the brain. I want to quote my friend Marcina, who always tells me, everything is shanty shanty, man. And I want to quote a young man I am mentoring named Moses, estranged from his home, Zimbabwe, a refugee in the deep outskirts of Southeast London, the only Black person in his residential home, who said, and I quote, "Rejection is not a loss, it is a redirection into something new." And as the earth rejects us for our childish ways, will we become wise to this new direction, a new consciousness she points us to when the rivers break their banks in the northwest of England, and when 3 months of rain falls in 6 minutes in Senegal? When the dizziness and vomiting from greenhouse gases and fumes caused by the bucket wheels and the drag lines in the tar sands scraping the skin off of the sacred First Nation peoples of their sacred lands. When fracking, Just the word alone implies the level of violence the earth must endure. Fracking for shale gas causes tremors that shakes that same gas into the taps of homes in Yorkshire and Lancashire. While the waters of Flint is planting seeds of tumours under the skins of black children. As the lungs of Caribbean 9-year-olds in South London fill with pollutant microbes so small the chlorophyll of trees cannot cleanse them. And they all take on the spirit of weeping willows. As you can see from my film, I have been angry with the movement. Its naivety revealing itself as a blinkered horse dragging its clanking carriage of privilege inheritance behind it so that it cannot hear how much power it has in its ears. The nuance of change is profound. We cannot change the world and not expect to change yourself. Personal revolution equals collective transformation. And even for me, under the surface of the anger, there has been disappointment, hurt, and dare I say envy on days when white girl whiteness looked so much easier because I was just exhausted with the weight of racist colonial legacies. No one wants to change. No one should want to change the skin they are born in, the body they were gifted with, and the cultural heritage that shines from it. And I say all of this to give context to the sensitivities that exist within when going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human spirit feeling packaged in melanated skin. Organising for this hour of your time was not without its tension. And it's a familiar feeling across the world. You just have to observe for yourself as actions taken to mobilise for change are driven either by panic or a colonial push at personal capacity. When you feel like your own life force is being used as a resource and you get pushed off the edges of cliffs when the design of your descent or flight is rigged with tripwires and historical blueprints that prioritize the imagination of a few who deem themselves elite, supreme as defined by them, putting output over people, status over process, and being first over being enriched. Decoloniality is about relationships based on visible and active respect. It's about mutual exchange and reciprocal appreciation, not just functional transactions. It is Ubuntu, I am because you are. The interconnection relies upon consciousness and moment-to-moment informed self-awareness. Colonial roots are tricksy. They merely whisper. 5G is potent, so we have to listen hard to the GPS of our own moral compass to locate, uproot, and replace the system the East India Company established with the power of our imagination reignited and our compassion united. And we are to stay vigilant because many miss the old normal, which was reliant upon the inadvertency of divide and conquer. You cannot move from positions of strength when you call upon a reckoning based in anger, hurt, guilt, or shame. Righteous anger is still anger. Guilt is a waste of energy. Privilege is a constructed force field that denies lessons of resilience. And sovereignty is not reserved for those who wear crowns bejeweled by stolen wealth, ripped from the lands by hands enslaved, indentured, or broken. We've tried one group's ancestral way to live in the garden. Now let's live by somebody else's. It's common sense. We have so many warnings, heads up about what's going wrong and where we're going wrong. Yet common sense seems to have left. So I say, chop off the limb that offends. No more top-down leadership. Co-leadership, contextual leadership, alternating leadership. Working to our strengths in times of emergency and challenging our weaknesses when we have time for a brief pause. History is a story happening right now, creating the future in the present, and this will be the past that our children grown will speak about. What do you want them to say? What do you want them to feel about personhood, about sovereignty and personal power before they talk about the stuff they own, how many likes they received upon their virtual identities? Unfortunately, the global north are late to the mission to saving the species. The earth will be fine as its own immune system kicks in. But fortunately, we can go forward with ancient wisdoms that hear the earth speak, with the technology of gratitude. Gratitude is the prayer that guides us back into our bodies. Our bodies are the antenna of our emotions that guide the spirit's return to its purpose of just being. Just being a human being should not scare us. Us being mature and wise enough to enjoy a simpler state of existence where our empathy and sensibilities are highly tuned to the stories in the room before lips have even parted, before the sensation of a handshake or a hug has left after you and another have separated. We're not prisoners in an open prison unless we give permission for that to be the case. This is a marathon, not a sprint to an illusionary finish line. Being real with self is the toughest rite of passage. Integrity in the movement requires that individuals not hide behind the skirts of an institutes.com when things get a little bit uncomfortable. To be inclusive is to trip switch our defaults and actively listen with the intent to action what is learned, to ask questions of our comfortability, to be okay with not knowing if what you're going to say is right or wrong, but that it just is. But we cannot leave out particular words. I have left out particular words in this keynote speech because I did not want to fall into co-opted triggers that have now become comfortable armchairs where clicktivists and keyboard warriors do their worst. This is not us, I believe. Language emerges through hearing what is not said, but what is felt. And I say all of this to give context of the sensitivities that exist within when going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human spirit feeling packaged in melanated skin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Zena, for that wide-ranging, rooted and deep reflection. On a personal note, I realised that I think that's the first time I've heard live singing in several months, and I really appreciated it. There's something about the human voice singing that really like reaches out to you as person to person. So thank you so much. In case there are any points from the audience? I've just been checking, and so far we've just had a chat lavished with praise for you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
But if there are any points, probably got time for one or two. Brilliant. Well, I suppose all that it remains for me to say is, once again, thank you to Zena Edwards, thank you to everybody who's attended, to Jean Goff, who has been doing the live captioning, to Nakasai Lawson, who has been our BSL interpreter for this afternoon session. And yes, we are continuing the season across for exchange until Friday the 13th of November. And we would love for you to connect with us through the other events and sign up to our mailing list.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.